I have a very good relationship with the IEA, honestly, and my predecessor and myself also in touch with the director and the IEA. It's just scientists. I mean, different views, different modeling, forecasting models. They're different. The assumptions are different. I think also it's important to show to people that recently our views are converging. I'll give you an example. Our short-term monthly outlook and the IEA's, we are converging. Last week, they were published, the IEA's report and the OPEC report on the same day. I believe it was August 11th. IEA raised their demand forecast. We slightly lowered ours, convergence. So it's all about methodology and assumptions, you know, because you may have an assumption about economic growth. We may have another assumption. When you feed that into your modeling, it comes out with the results. So it's a technical...
That's a pretty significant technical difference often.
Well, it depends. I mean, but if you look at the consensus, I think if we take oil demand, for example, we feel very optimistic about demand this year. I'm personally quite bullish on demand. I think there's a lot to come from China still. The gas to liquid, with gas prices spiking lately, we see a big move to consuming more oil in Europe, which is unforeseen, let alone in other parts of the world, in Asia, the Middle East. And the missing factor is still jet fuel recovery. And I believe that's a significant component of what's missing in bringing demand back to its pre-COVID levels, albeit there are a lot of reports and analysts who say that we've already hit pre-COVID levels. In OPEC, we don't feel that it's yet back to pre-COVID levels. We believe by the end of this year we will, and we see a growth of 3 million barrels a day this year compared to last year.
So OPEC as an organization controls what, about 40% of global oil production, around there?
30-something.
30 to 40%. Okay. So you guys are getting a lot of flack for inflation. People around the world, politicians, the West, blaming OPEC for the high prices that we've seen. What is your response to that? Is OPEC to blame for the inflation we're seeing?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's all relative. That's number one. Number two is OPEC is doing its part. We've been increasing production in line with what we see, a measured and gradual mechanism, which has been very transparent. We are, you know, in the declaration of cooperation with another 10 non-OPEC producers. We're bringing on these group of people, 10 countries, to work with us. So it's about 46, 47% of global production. And we're working together in a very transparent way. And, I mean, the markets, as you said in the beginning, you know, everybody's now paying full attention to OPEC and its meetings. They know when the schedules are. They know the methodology that we go through and analyze. So we are doing everything we can to bring the market back to balance. But there are economic factors that are really beyond OPEC's control.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the activities of central banks. There's an argument to be made, frankly, about oil prices today. We saw over 100 back in 2008. That was 15 years ago. And when you think about that a little bit more broadly, there are suggestions we should actually be talking about prices closer to 200 than closer to 100. There
are those suggestions, yes. And if I go back to the issue of underinvestment, that's another alarm bell, if I may use that term, you know, that prices maybe today at these levels are not reflective of that issue.
Yeah, and so actually they're low. Yeah. Oil's cheap, is what you'd say.
And especially when you compare it to other commodities like gas, like coal, you know, I mean, oil has gone up, Brent has gone up by what, 40, 50% compared to middle of last year, I think. If you look at natural gas in Europe, it's gone up by over 1,000%.
When you talk to politicians in the West, do you think that they understand that? I had a conversation with the NATO Secretary General a couple of months ago, and I asked him, you know, I know you're talking about climate change and the need for renewables, but are you willing to work with the energy that we have today and the producers? I asked him about OPEC. I asked him about the oil and gas majors, and he said, yes, we are. But is that a conversation that you're having?
Well, personally, I have embarked on a policy of starting to knock the doors of policymakers, whether it's UN-related officials, whether it's European. And this is one of my key priorities, actually, is to start to knock the doors and start to activate a dialogue with all the stakeholders, policymakers in the European Union. I have a meeting scheduled in next week with the EU. And I think it's important to have this dialogue. We have established...
So no more closed-door policy, in a sense?
Well, OPEC has never really had a closed-door policy. We've been knocking doors for years, and we want somebody to open the door and let us in.
Yeah.
And I think once that happens, it will be in the benefit of everybody, because there has to be that understanding that OPEC is not behind this price increase.
Yeah.
And there are other factors beyond OPEC that are really behind the spikes we've seen in gas and oil. And again, I think in a nutshell, for me, it's underinvestment, chronic underinvestment.